Everyone, I wanted to go through the Vlookup and Hlookup stuff that messed up yesterday and just indicate kind of where the problem was. So the problem actually occurred on one parameter that I had forgotten to include, and hopefully this will simplify that. So let's just get into the basics of Vlookup and kind of what the purpose is. So Vlookup is really used if we have a bunch of data and we want to kind of look into it and pull out values. So maybe I'm in HR or something like that, and I'm really trying to look at a data set and find out how many times somebody was absent from work or something like that, where I've got a large amount of data and I really kind of want to pull a piece of information out. So this is a really simple example, but you can imagine this being more complex. So in this case, this data set right here on the left, this is going to be my table of data that I'm looking up. And this, so this is the data that's been entered, and then on the right here is where I'm using the function to look into that table and pull out a piece of information. So for instance, I'm gonna look up Sue and see how many cats she has from the data table on the left. So what I'm doing here is I'm using my Vlookup function. The first parameter that I'm adding in is my lookup value, so that's the name that I'm looking up within the table. The next is the table array, or the where the actual data table that I'm looking into is, and for that I selected these three columns. So column A through C, and I'll show you how I was able to select that in a second here in another example. And then I'm adding the index column number that I want returned back. So in this case, I want number of cats, so that's going to be number column 2. If I wanted number of dogs, that would be column 3. And then the last parameter says this range lookup, and I'll show you what that means in a second. But basically, what this function does is it gives us the opportunity to either have an approximate match or a exact match, and it defaults actually to approximate. And like I said, that can be good and that can be bad depending on what you're trying to do. And I'll show you an example of maybe where it causes some problems. But you can see I've added it false, which means we're looking for an exact match of Sue within the data. And so when I add that, I get 6, and if we look over at Sue, 6 cats. So that's what we're pulling out. Now for Andy, I've got the same thing here. I'm basically, I'm using Andy as the lookup value. I'm looking at the same columns, and I'm returning number of cats. Again, with a false, meaning I'm looking for an exact match. And as you can see, I get a 3 back. And when we look down at the Andy column, there's a 3. Now we also see that there's an Andrew up here. That's a 5, and so if I had this as a true, which means I'm looking for an approximate match, it'll return a 5, meaning it's approximately matching Andrew as Andy, and it returns that. So as you can see, there may be certain times when that's good and maybe certain times when it's bad, but it defaults to that approximate, and that's actually what was causing the problem last time. Okay, so let's do another example here, where let's say I want to look up Lisa. So I'm just going to put the name here as Lisa. Now I'm going to do a Vlookup. I'm going to open that. My lookup value is going to be the name that I'm looking up. The table array, I'm going to select those 3 columns. My index column number is going to be 2 for number of cats. When I put that comma in, it gives me this little drop down to remind me what I need to do, or what parameter I'm entering. So true is an approximate match, false is an exact. I'm going to go with an exact, so I'm going to put in false, and we return 8. So that's Vlookup. And again, the reason is because our data is vertical, meaning as the function runs, it looks at this row first, then it looks at this row, then it looks at this row, then it looks at this row. So it's moving down vertically. Now, what if our data was a little bit different? So I'm gonna copy this table, and I'm gonna actually paste it down here. And if we come in and we do a paste special, we can actually transpose that data, and now it's horizontal. So if we look back up here, you can see that it's the same data, it's organized differently, right? So what I'm going to do this time is, instead of vertically going down, I'm going to want the indexing of how Excel looks at the data to move horizontally. So it would move from column, instead of going from row 2, 3, 4, it's going to go column B, C, D. All right, so now I'm moving horizontally. Hopefully that makes sense. So I can do a similar type function here. So let me do, I'll do something similar here. So I'll put a name, and let's do number of dogs this time. And I'll pick something from the middle. We'll put a Chris. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to do an Hlookup. Again, because I want to move horizontally. So I'm going to do an Hlookup, and it's going to give me the same parameters. So my lookup value is going to be Chris, or the value in that, the value in that box. My lookup table, well, instead of selecting those columns, I can just select these rows. And then my index row, I want dogs back, so it's going to be, this is row 1, this is row 2, this is row 3, so I'm going to do row 3, and again, I can do true or false. I'm going to put false, and let's see, we should return back a 5. We return back a 5. So again, I'm looking at data, I'm telling Excel to move through data horizontally. And that's why it's Hlookup, versus when I move through it vertically, that's Vlookup. Okay, hopefully that was a little more easy to follow, and give you some understanding on how those two functions work. Thanks.